Welcome to the original International Teacher Podcast with hosts in 4 different time zones, Greg, Darian, Kent, JP, and Hannah, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the International Teacher Podcast. I am Greg, the single guy, or just Greg, I guess, sometimes. And I have 2 wonderful hostesses with me. I've got Hannah. How you doing, Hannah?
Woohoo! I'm doing great today, Greg.
You're in Iowa instead of Karachi right now, so hey, go summer vacation,
But she's locked
right?
in the basement.
Oh, yeah.
In the cold basement.
And JP Mint, you're still in Mexico. Welcome,
Still in
JP.
Mexico. Rainy season is here. It's nice and cool. I'm wearing long sleeves. Yay!
I tell you what, we have an episode right now with our guest. We're going to be talking, I think, about AI in interviewing for schools. So as teachers interviewing for schools, the future and the now of AI, I believe, and we're going to wait to hear from Rich. I'd like to introduce Rich Boerner, and he's coming to us from Washington right now. So how you doing, Rich?
Doing wonderful. Thanks to you guys for having me on your podcast. I'm honored and excited to share some stories and get to know you better.
Well, we're honored to have you on here too, right?
We're excited. Hannah's excited as a fellow Brazilian TCK resident as well. And I'm excited because, Rich, I've seen your name pop up over the years as head of school and various schools. So I'm excited. And then Greg's excited for the tech. So you've got 3 excited hosts to talk to you
I'm
today.
excited about Rich, not just the tech.
Okay, all right.
I'm a teacher first and then tech later, right? Anyway, Rich, can you give us a nutshell? Well, not too much of a nutshell, but can you give us a history and your journey of international and education in general?
Yeah. I started in 2005, 21 years ago. And my wife and I and our 2 young kids went overseas for the first time, like many of us from our home country, landed in Seoul, South Korea at a very, very young school. And over the period of 5 years there, grew up with the school, became the head of the school. In the last few years, we grew from 400 students to 1,400 in those 5 years. It's a massive growth move. I hired 40 to 50 teachers a year. It was a massive undertaking. And that's a foreshadowing into the conversation for later. It was an incredible life-changing experience for our family. We took a 2-year leave of absence from our public school back in Washington State. And after year 1, I called my dad and I said, I don't think we're coming home. This is pretty great. We love the cultural experience for our children. We love the learning we get to stretch our edges with. And so that turned into a 21-year career, or 20 years. It's been a year that I've been back home now. And we went to Bangladesh for 5 years as well. I was the head at the American International School in Dhaka. And then I spent a decade in Brazil at Grade, the American School São Paulo. And, if you were to ask me what's my favorite school, I'd say yes. They're all great. They all different and all, really, really impactful in my own development as an individual.
We won't ask you that. Okay, Rich, we won't ask you that question.
I'm not going to tell you.
It's like saying, where are you from, Rich? It's like, where, or your kids, where are you from?
So primarily it sounds like 3 schools in 3 countries.
3 schools in 3 very distinctly different parts of the world, which was fascinating, from a cultural perspective, which will foreshadow TrueFit as well, about what different contexts those are and how to survive and thrive in different places around the world and how to adapt to those new situations. Is a real exciting time, but also a challenge for people. And all of that formative experience that I went through and the successes I had and the failures that I had and the mistakes I made really were cementing for me how I understood how we traverse this world as international educators, and how we can help perhaps make those connections more impactful and last longer.
Tell us a little bit about that experience in Korea, that first experience. You said you had 2 little kids. Was your wife also a teacher? Was she a trailing spouse or able to work, well, maybe not remotely back in 2000 something, but
Yeah, so she was a teacher, high school social studies teacher, and over the period of her time at KIS, she became a librarian. When we were the first employees to have faculty children at the school.
Oh,
And when we
wow.
first were sent our tickets to fly over to Seoul, it was just for Colleen and I.
Oh,
And so
whoops.
we contacted the school and said, the kids are 5 and 8. They'd like to come with us. Is that possible? And I just remember all of the things. We went to orientation, and I'm leading orientation. I'm the principal of the middle school and the high school, and there's no setup for the kids. They hadn't thought about that, right? Those things they weren't part of the DNA of the school. So then we're cobbling together solutions while I'm running it. Colleen's involved in the learning, and that happens in that orientation week. And all of those kind of formative experiences were just fascinating as we started our journey overseas. We laugh about all those stories now, and of course, embed all those ideas into future school, processes. But it was a wonderful, vulnerable moment for a young family, and so many of us as families and as individuals have made that journey, and had that moment where you step off the plane and say, "Do I really want to do this?" I remember waking up the next morning. We got to our house, we got to our apartment, we spent the night, we woke up the next morning, and I looked over to Colleen and I said, "Should we just go home? I don't think we can do this." I meant that. Like I couldn't do it. And we wandered outside of our little neighborhood and we found a Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm like, I'm not really a Dunkin' Donuts person, but it was like something familiar.
Yeah.
We walked in, we got a donut, kind of sat down, we looked at each other and looked at the kids. And of course, kids didn't know any different. And we're like, no, we can do this. And then 20 years later, the whole world had been opened up to us.
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts brings us together.
The idea of, I mean, it's so nice to hear the idea that you have second thoughts. Like it happens and you start to think, did I make a big mistake? It happened to me when I was 20 years into this career and I landed in China. And it was the next day after, settling in that night, having a pretty okay sleep because, you don't sleep for like 3 days before traveling. And just stepping out and seeing I'm in China and what all that entailed. And I started to think maybe this was not a great idea. And it's nice to hear that others have that idea as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the human condition. And we're certainly, every move we made was anxiety producing. No matter what role I had, no matter how much years of experience that we had done this for our children, for us. And some of that is just the culture and context of the school or of the country we're moving to, but it's also the school. We have a very distant relationship in connecting and making a decision that we're going to go work in another country, in another school we've never met. Context is different. And so does the school. And then you get there and you're hoping all the things that happened in that kind of very short dance are real and are matching what your actual abilities are. And when it doesn't work out, and we know all kinds of people where that fit didn't happen, the impact of that's significant. So international educators are risk takers. They're bold individuals. How many people give up their job before they get another one?
Oh yeah.
I tell you what,
that whole construct is just, it's completely foreign in the business world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so
in any kind of world. And nobody ever gives up a job until they get the next job.
Of course.
But we do every time.
Every time.
And it's not for everybody. In fact, I was just mentioning this on another podcast episode. The shortest I've seen a teacher land in the country and leave, 3 days.
Well, see, I was going to do one.
But she must not have found a Dunkin' Donuts in Honduras.
Dunkin' Donuts saved me. I could have been the world record holder.
I think I've had someone last 1 week.
Wow.
1 week.
And those are the outliers, of course.
Oh yeah, I mean the reason we remember that
at all.
Yeah.
These like
no, they aren't normal, but it happens, and and it happened to me. I thought I had the secret sauce of how to find that great person that would work perfectly and fit, and And more often than I ever want to admit, it didn't work out. And, one of the things that I'll say publicly, often heads of schools, me included, uh, pat ourselves on the back when we get the hiring right and the person lasts forever. And then when it doesn't get right, we kind of blame the candidate and say, well, they didn't fit in.
Yeah.
It can't be both ways. And so, when we think about that person that only lasts a week, what happened? Like, what ownership do both sides have in that relationship not working? And what can we do about that so that in the future that happens less and less and less? Because the impact on community, on children, on trust, your parents is real. And I think we minimize that too much.
I have a question for you. If I was to, I know this is a broad,
Mm.
average question, an average. I was wondering if I had a discussion with somebody and said, the biggest investment, in my opinion, for an international school is to hire an expat teacher to come
Mhm.
into the country. And it's a major investment because of
Yep.
not just the position, but the insurance, the whole package,
Yeah.
the loss, the reset, everything, the in between. Can you put an average just on the cost for a school to
Mhm.
to lose a teacher
Yeah.
mid-contract?
Yeah. $25,000.
Okay.
That's the all-in average cost. When you think about the visa procedures, you think about the re-recruiting, you think about the housing. If somebody leaves in the midterm of a housing, you've got a contract with
Yeah.
that housing, that landlord that's got to be paid out. All of those ancillary costs that we don't really think about.
Yeah.
Substitutes, if they're leaving in the middle of the year, or you got to hire a replacement that you didn't budget for, the extra flight costs, all of the repatriation back. Some schools, maybe that isn't paid to the individual. Maybe it is. But typically, in the schools we worked at, we factored it to be about $25,000. That's
That
math.
matches what I've researched on it, and my
Yep.
guess was about 25. And
Yep.
I know it's not the dollar cost, but it's just interesting
Yeah.
to think about it from a school perspective, because when
Right.
an individual takes on a contract and feels like, oh, I just need to leave then,
Right.
it puts a lot on the
What we
school.
call the runner, doing
It's a
the runner.
runner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No, the
it's negative
commitment
in
is,
every way.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that relationship and that bond of I'm committing to you and you're committing to me is real. And both sides need to take that honestly and sincerely
Yeah.
in that, initial 2-year commitment.
Yeah. So then you moved to Bangladesh. What?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that recruitment happened. Was
Mhm.
that? I mean, by that time, it sounded like you were a secondary principal. Were you handpicked? Was there networking involved, or did you actually go to a fair or recruitment company?
Yeah, good question. So after my 3rd year at KIS, I was appointed the head. So the head left and I was offered the headship. So I did that for 2 years. And then as I was looking for jobs, I was applying like everybody, picking different schools around the world that I thought would be good for our family, more so than I was interested in the location of where I was going to live. But that was a factor. And Jim Ambrose, who's a long-serving head of school and worked for Search Associates back in the day, who's sadly passed on, um, contacted me and recommended the school because he had worked there in the 80s. And he said, if you're looking for a school, this is a real gem in a part of the world that often people overpass or pass over, and you should give it a look. And so initial thought was, no, I don't know if that's the right school for us. And you kind of go through that mentality that we all do about, well, it doesn't hurt to apply, right? So I went through the application process, which was a traditional process, and then was flown in for interviews. And it was at that moment that I kind of fell in love with the community. And what the school's ethos was about, and how it was there essentially to serve all of these mission and aid organizations and embassies that were really trying to uplift a country that has had tremendous challenges since its inception. And our role was to help those children become powerful, impactful, empathic learners. And the former school leadership had done a tremendous job of positioning the school. And so I felt it was a great opportunity. And the board at that time felt I was the right person. So that was a magical place to raise children. in an incredibly challenging environment.
The
But
right fit.
we learned so much. Yeah.
I've spoken to a couple of people that have worked and lived and worked and taught in Bangladesh, and every one of them speaks so positively of it. And it's so funny because it's not really on the radar of many people, but when they end up getting there,
Yeah.
it's few that say to and done. They stay.
Right.
They want to stay. They want to commit to more time. Is that something that you had seen as well?
Absolutely. In fact, the tenure there was really interesting. If we could find, and the candidate knew really what they were getting themselves into and understood it the best that they could, not never being there, they would stay a long time. We would often have 8 and 10 years, retention with individuals because of the specialness of the community. And I think that's something that, when we recruit ourselves and we're out looking for jobs, there's so many international schools in the world, and there's a certain series of schools that have a brand reputation, that we all kind of talk about as this pinnacle of place to work at or whatever. And I have always bristled at that mentality. There are wildly successful schools that many people haven't heard of or aren't on the same radar screens as others, with unbelievably talented educators doing remarkable work with children that deserve every attention and every bit of success that every other school does. And yet, there's this mentality in the recruitment process that we move people along from kind of known school to known school. And it's been historic. It's not just the 2 decades I've been doing it, but 3 or 4 decades before that. And it has been something that I think it gets talked about in the circles of leadership. It doesn't get dealt with in any significant way. And I think there are schools trying to break that mold and really look at a more diverse pool of individuals. But we still, and it is true in any sector, in any industry. If you worked in the tech industry and you worked any one of the Magnificent Sevens, the odds of you getting another job are 10 to 20x anybody else that doesn't work for those companies. What if you're the worst employee at that school or that company, right?
Good point.
How would we know? But you have Apple on your resume. You must be good. Well, that can't be true for everybody. And if you've been at some company that no one's ever heard of, but you're absolutely crushing it, how will we get to know that? So interesting. I just find that stuff really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Definitely.
No, it's true. And the line of work that I do now, when I see one of those schools on a CV, I'm like, wow. And then, going through the interview process with the client and saying, yeah, it's not all that it's cracked up to be, or, there are hidden skeletons in that particular closet.
Yeah.
The foreshadowing is just killing me, because now we're talking about my next
But we're not
question
there
would
yet.
be
We're not there yet.
my next question would be like, how are you planning on fixing that or
But we got
changing
one
that?
more.
But
we got
can't
one more
because
country.
JP
Hannah,
still
take it
has
away.
us,
It's your country.
Okay. So let's talk Brazil, because, I tell people I'm Brazilian by heart, even though my passport's American. But I love the country. But anyway, what led you to Brazil?
Another wonderful opportunity. What I fell in love with Graded, and one of the great taglines that was there long before me was that it's an American school with a Brazilian heart. The energy and the passion that is experienced in Brazil, and yes, exactly. And I haven't lived in all the other countries to suggest that isn't true elsewhere. I just know it's true in Brazil.
Yeah.
And you could feel it. You walk that campus it had a heartbeat. And what I was also really impressed with the school as I was going through the recruitment process was that it was just about to embark. It was at 95 years old when I arrived.
Wow.
And yet it had no interest in holding on to any part of its legacy that hindered itself. Now, it wanted to honor that history for sure, and it should. But it wasn't interested in just kind of resting on that, but yet saying, okay, what can we envision to be next? And so when I arrived with the opportunity to really think creatively about what's the next iteration and phase of this institution's history, and how do we advance it, and how do we modernize it so that it's ready for the next 100 years. Now, I would argue no one can do that in the world the way it's advancing, but okay, for maybe the next 5 years or 5 weeks nowadays.
But thinking that way. Yeah.
But thinking that way, absolutely. And so that opportunity, the permission to dream was really, really palpable in a community that was alive to grow and evolve itself and get better.
Yeah, because when you think a school of 95 years, it could be the complete opposite.
Oh,
where
absolutely. And I interviewed
we do it this way. We've been doing it this way for 95 years. We're not going to change.
We don't need to change.
Yeah, it's very refreshing to hear that they were willing to look internally, see what worked, see what might need to change.
Well, and I think, in my life and kind of who I am and my dispositions, I'm a catalyst for change. I'm a change junkie. Not for change's sake, but really to advance the ball and move it forward. And, if you were to line up every teacher that ever was graded while I was there, you might get some people that would say that was the best change we ever had. And some might say, I don't know why he made those moves. But nonetheless, we moved. But that's important when you think about who you're going to bring into a school, because if I wasn't a catalyst and they wanted me to catalyze, there would be a misfit. Right. And as I think about, I don't know that I knew all of that. I think I hoped it. I think I thought I saw it. Whether the board at that time and the community felt I was going to bring that change or not, I'm not so sure. But it worked out, and that fit was there, and that's to last a decade and be lucky enough to continue to serve for that long meant that there were some pretty positive times throughout that experience.
Yeah, because let's dig into the head of school thing. It's a term of 3 years, or is it 4?
It really, that's evolving a bit. It normally, normal's the wrong word. Typically, it's about a 3-year start. Okay. We're now seeing schools trying to extend that, where they're having maybe a 4-year initial contract, or it's a 3-year, and then if they find a good marriage, then they might offer a 5-year with maybe some opt out. Wow. I've even seen some heads sign a 10-year contract with
initial
follow through with their vision, right?
Secondary contract.
Second. Okay.
Yeah, so they can follow through with their vision that they're starting instead of starting it and handing it off to someone else.
Now, what's interesting is that's contrary to what's happening. That the average length of a head of school tenure is decreasing radically since the pandemic. And the movement by boards of exercising decisions to move to a different head of school is happening at a way more rapid rate than it ever has before. And it's taking on, I would argue, a more corporate approach, where they're looking at the head and the need in the school and saying, you can deliver that need for this period of time, and then I'm going to go get somebody else who has a different need to go do that next thing, rather than to say this person can evolve into doing multiple things.
Man,
that's an interesting shift in international schools. Yeah.
Now, on a more, not to switch subjects a little bit, but a little bit, what year did you go to Brazil then?
So I joined in 2015 and then was there until 25.
That was the same year that my husband and I went to Rio to teach for 2 years.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
And I'm finishing up my 10th year. I have one more week of school for my 10th year here, and then July 31st is my 10th year. And I'm one of those guys, Rich, that, and the listeners will know this, that I'm one of those guys that was doing the 2, 2, 3, maybe 2. And it wasn't, I was just interested in seeing the world and being at great schools and signing a 2-year contract and finishing it. But wow, it's interesting to be somewhere for such a long time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You really get to understand a community deeply. I do think ultimately, though, there is a time and a place where new ideas and fresh perspectives are healthy. I have a series of abilities and I have a series of deficits, just like everybody. And, over time, I think I exhausted every bit of ability I could. And maybe the warts were showing more towards the end. I don't know. And now they have new leadership, and Jane McGee's there, and she's doing wonderful things to take it to the next level and change the things that I couldn't do and make those things better, and then build on the things that perhaps I was successful at. And that's what happens in our schools. Anytime we move on, we proudly offer up our best version of what we offered to somebody and then let them take it to the next place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, build them to succeed and have some kind of legacy of improvement.
As best you can. I mean, we all are doing the best work we know how.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in all that time, your two little kids in Korea grew up in the system as TCKs.
So our oldest grew up and graduated from DACA, and then our youngest graduated from graded. So they had multiple school experiences. That has been very interesting as they have grown into young adults about how they see the world. I often describe kind of the U.S. centric mindset as the U.S. is kind of the center of the world and everything kind of revolves, and that's how we understand ourselves as Americans. Our kids really bristle at that construct because they've lived in so many places to see people thrive and succeed with different means, more, less, different. Humans are humans, and we can thrive and succeed in all kinds of different political environments, different socioeconomic environments, different cultural environments, different religious contexts. And to give our children that exposure and that understanding has fundamentally changed how they view the world. And we're really proud of how they view the world, with a very much of an open mindset. And that was really the ultimate reason that we did the 2-year leave of absence, was we wanted to give them an experience. We realized 2 years may not be enough to really have that, change process really sink in. Now, if you had them on the podcast, they would say all kinds of other stuff, I'm sure, about their experience. Good, bad, and different.
Let us tell you the real thing, Dad
Exactly.
didn't tell you the whole thing.
Dad's just, blowing smoke, right?
But it's true. And then in the process, you yourself and your wife also change. We were just talking about this, that we would not be the same without all these cultures, without living these experiences more in depth than, say, traveling or tourism. When you live in a country day in and day out, it affects you and it changes your personality, your likes, your dislikes. So who would Rich have been without those 20 years if he'd stayed in Tacoma, Washington?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, I tell people all the time when they're making decisions about this job or that job, excuse me. And they'll say, well, I don't know which one to pick. And, what will happen in my life if I do this versus that? The real answer is you don't get to know, because you only get to make one decision. And then you embrace that decision with everything you have to grow as much as you can until you get pointed in a direction where you have to make another decision. And so I don't know what I would have been like. I certainly know I wouldn't have had an understanding of the world the way I do, at least not the personal connection to that understanding. I mean, I was raised in a family that really valued diversity, valued equity, understood and educated and almost preached that into kind of the fabric of our as kids. But I couldn't understand it the same way I could by living in it and seeing it and appreciating it and being frustrated by it, because they weren't my norms. They weren't my culture. And to think that we only embrace every part of everybody else's culture is kind of silly too. Like, there are certain things that are just more natively easy for me in the United States than they are in any other country I've lived. And that's comforting, but it also doesn't stretch me in the same way. And so some days I really love the ease that I have today to go walk into the grocery store and everything works the way I want it to work.
You can read all the labels and know what's inside the cans.
That's just easy.
I'm going to change my answer now. I'm changing my answer. When people ask me about, like, why do I teach overseas and how, they want to know what it's like to teach overseas. I think your answer is just amazing. It was a long answer and I could get the gist of it. But I tell you what, not only did it change your life for the better as like a side benefit to teaching overseas, but to live overseas for so long, but it changed your kids' perspectives dramatically. And it's who you are today. So I love that answer. I mean, I need to I need to say that more when people ask me those questions like that.
You know, as like the resident TCK, like I think back on my own experience, right? I was 12 when my parents moved us to Rio, and I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm fluent in Portuguese. I taught myself Spanish, right? Like I'm really grateful for that. I ended up doing my senior year of high school in the US because we ran into some visa issues.
Sure.
But I look back on like the peers that I had at my school here and the differences between them and me. And I think back, like, would I be in international education if I just grew up here in the US? Like, you know, I don't
Probably
know if
not.
I would be doing
No.
that, right?
Probably not. Yeah.
I knew the world a lot differently than they do, of course, because of that TCK experience, right? And there were times in middle school and high school when I told my parents, I don't want to be here. Take me home, you know?
I heard
But
that from mine.
You heard that?
I'm so
Oh, yeah.
grateful. I'm so grateful. And now I'm raising my own TCKs and I'm like, I know they're going to have their days too, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, being a kid's hard, let alone where, doing it in other locations. But I'm not so sure my kids wouldn't have said the same thing at the local elementary school that they were at and say, I don't want to be at this school either because, they're having conflict with somebody or there's some challenge or university they're going through. But it's compounded definitely internationally. But that's part of the growth of us as humans is to go through those challenging moments and persevere and become resilient and overcome.
Yeah.
On the flip side of it, though, Matt, who is one of our other co-hosts, one of our founders, he's got 4 boys. And living here in Saudi, we'd go to Maldives quite a bit. It's not exactly a cheap place to go.
No.
So one day the kids are all like, Dad, can we just go back to our other home and just stay there in the Maldives? Because, that's their thinking. And they were all elementary kids, right? And that was their reality. There's Wisconsin, there's Maldives, there's like, let's go here. Go back to Venezuela. It was really sweet. I love that anecdote. I always stick with it. So we all know international education, and it's that best kept secret in the world, as well as for your kids, those intrinsic values, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all 4 of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at International Teacher Podcast at our handle.
All right. And thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners. And though we're not monetized, we are here for you. And we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
Can you tell us now why you're not in Brazil, you're in Tacoma, Washington, and what you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, we made the decision to leave Graded for a multitude of reasons. Some was very personal. We had aging family members, both on my wife's side and my side, that needed more attention. That was a pulling force. Our kids were growing into adulthood, and we wanted to spend more time with them. We had missed, they had been out of the nest, if you will, for a while. We knew there was a sunset period. We weren't going to retire fully overseas. And so there were some callings that were kind of pulling us back. At the same time, knowing that I was approaching a decade at Graded, that was sunsetting as well. And I was thinking about, okay, well, what's next? Do we go overseas again and do that, but that won't provide for those kind of family needs and desires? Or do we try to pivot and do something different? And that's where the combination of the opportunity to leave the headship, but then also still serve in the space of education really came to be with my co-founder and I as we began to dream about how we could help in a different way. That started a series of conversations really that was really permeating during the pandemic. There was a group of 7 heads. We would meet every Saturday. We were from all over the world, and we would share stories about what we were doing, how we were surviving it, what we were getting wrong, stealing each other's ideas, and really just being therapy for one another to really help get through a really hard time, like we all tried to do. We would have different series of topics. And sometimes it was, tell about the worst moment, tell about the best moment, tell about something you got completely wrong, your worst day is ahead. They were fascinating, really raw, vulnerable moments. That for Paul Richards and I, who's the co-founder with me of TrueFit Talent, began a further conversation, a kind of a side conversation that really bubbled up a couple of years later, where we started to explore this area in recruitment, really through the lens of our own experiences. Those were the stories we were telling about what was the best recruitment process you went through as a candidate? What was the worst? How many times had you been ghosted by schools in your career? Teachers speak of this a lot, and the volume of candidates applying for specific jobs. I was at fault of it at Graded doing hiring where you didn't communicate back to candidates, but it happens at the head level too, all the time, even though the volume isn't as large. And so that began a journey and a conversation about what we thought was a bit broken, what hadn't changed in decades in the experience for candidates in schools, and what maybe we could do to be a part of the solution. So
when did this launch? Did this launch essentially after you left Graded, a little bit before? I thought there might have been
a little bit before. So it's been, so now what is it now? Gosh, it's June of 2026. The gray hair. It was about 2.5 years prior to this time when we began to really formulate the idea of TrueFit Talent. Before we had a name, and before we had any, whatever you might call a product, we began to envision what was possible. And so for about 6 months, Paul and I spent nights and weekends meeting and talking remotely. We began to try to solve a couple of things in all in different spaces. The first thing we tried to solve for was what causes people to be successful or fail in work? Just that simple question. And we studied it. We read research. We looked at industry. We looked at education. And the findings were compelling. In education and not in education, the things that cause success and failure are the same. They're the human condition. They're the metacognitive abilities or inabilities that we demonstrate in the workplace. Our inability or our ability to adapt to new context, to solve problems, to resolve conflict, to operate work on a team, to demonstrate empathy, to show our self-awareness. So we said, okay, if that's true, and by the way, none of those are about subject matter expertise. None of them. Because if you can't do those things, it doesn't matter what expertise you have in physics or in literature. You can't reach kids. You can't work across teams. We really listened to that research and said, okay, well, if that's true, then we've got two new problems. How do you assess that? That's like hard to assess. And then what way would you assess it? So that's when we realized we had an idea that we wanted to create a solution that then would build the company forward. And then we began to really tackle how would we go about measuring these things. Measuring somebody's self-awareness is hard. Measuring somebody's ability to resolve conflict maybe is a little bit easier. Measuring somebody's empathy, really challenging.
Yeah, when you say measuring, I'm hearing scoring, and that's virtually impossible.
Right.
Like out of 10, out of 100, you're like, that person has 68% empathy. That person has 32% ability to work with someone. So are you talking more in silos of, or like a rubric in a sense, like categories, like meets the expectation of empathy? How do you measure?
Think about it in the lens of competency. So we want to measure somebody's competence in their demonstrated actions in a moment in time around how they've expressed empathy in a situation that's difficult, that they need to resolve, and then get at an understanding. And so when we think about learning, right, with children, what we're really looking for is evidence. We want to find that they have evidence to demonstrate what we've taught them, that they can use that information and then display it to us in a unique and novel way would even be better. So you put them in a situation, you let to see them if they can demonstrate that. You get a real view of how somebody actually behaves in a situation. That was the big breakthrough for us, was that one, we could figure out how to measure it with validity and reliability. And so the first person we hired onto our team was a research scientist who studied data analytics and performance.
Yeah.
And so she went to work at figuring out how to actually measure this and how to hard code that rubric of assessments. So we measure over 60 competencies across 6 talent areas for every applicant that ever uses the system to apply for a position or to use it to be hired into a position. So we're looking at a multitude of things demonstrated in the work that they do. So the question was, okay, if we can do it and it's statistically viable, and it was, how would we do it? What solution would we use? And this is where we differentiate because, again, let's go back to the research. When we study what actually predicts success in jobs, we understand that those talents are there, what we call talents, self-awareness, empathy, conflict resolution. But what doesn't predict success are the things we all use. The resume. The resume is not a predictor of success. It does tell us what somebody has done. It tells us where they worked. It tells us what education they have. It doesn't
tell us if we're the worst at Google.
It does
right?
not. It does
it
not.
does not.
It does not. And in fact, it doesn't tell us the ability to do anything. It tells us what I've done. It tells us the conferences I attended, right? My resume looks great because I've had a lot of leadership opportunities. So at every school I've ever led, I've ran a strategic plan.
Everyone looks good on paper. That's what I heard from a school head.
That's right. Yeah. And so then the question is, so what? Did the strategic plans that I actually implemented move the needle at all? How did my leadership influence learning at that school? And what ways can I demonstrate that in a resume? I can't. It's the filterer. And so if you imagine that 50 people apply to a job and we look at a resume, you're never really going to give all 50 people equal view, right? You're just not going to have the time to do that. Nor are you going to be able to equitably assess without using bias. So the things that influence us in bias are things that are familiar to us, right? So I know there are a certain set of colleges in the United States that are more prestigious than others. So those candidates that went to those schools are advantaged. Now, maybe some would say they should be advantaged. I would say demonstrate that you're a great teacher or a great leader. And then if you went to that college, that might also add something to me, but it's the inverse is what we do. We look at the college first rather than we look at their impact. And we do this for the schools that people worked at, which goes back to kind of those brand schools, right? If this school's on your resume, you have a better shot. But what if you weren't successful at that school? Well, we don't know that. The cover letter is even worse.
Yeah.
It is an amalgam.
I'm waiting for the cover letter to go the dodo bird, like the reference letter.
Yeah.
Because honestly, now with AI, everyone's writing these cover letters that are just saying the same thing.
Exactly. Well, and not only that, so are the resumes being written by AI. And in fact, I would suggest if you aren't using AI to address your resume, you're probably going to be behind. Like the idea that I can take a resume and a cover letter, which is still traditional in most schools and most companies, by the way, and I can actually have AI tailor it to every part of the job description. I can even go and research and send my agent out to go pull information that's recent on your website and refer to it so it looks like I'm paying close attention to things that are happening in the moment in your school so that when somebody reads it, they get excited by it. That's theater. That's not substance. Now, it's smart, but it doesn't help you understand if you're good at the job you're being hired to do. But it's going to get you potentially an interview. And then what happens is we go through an interview process, which also doesn't have a lot of correlation. Certainly unstructured interviews don't have a lot of correlation to job performance. And we go through a dance, what I call performance theater. And I listen in and I hear somebody say something incredibly eloquent or tell a story I have familiarity with, and I like it. And we say things at the end of the interview committee. We go, man, wasn't she great? I really liked her. She'd really fit in well. Those could be true statements, but likely they're filtered by a bias we have for that person because of certain aspects that weren't about the substance of their impact. And when we ask questions like, tell me a time when, I have an answer to all the tell me a time whens. I have rehearsed them. I've prepared them. And they're, by the way, the best version that ever happened. Of course they are. I'm in an interview. And I'm not telling any mistruths, but I'm certainly making all of my stories most impactful because I want the opportunity at the job.
Wow.
So what we've shifted to do is to say, well, what if we put people in real simulated experiences under real pressure with real scenarios that are culturally and contextually designed for the school you're working at? So when we work with a school, they get to help us write the role play scenarios that candidates are in that fit a school in Asia with a host majority population, with declining enrollment, and pressures on economics, or whatever the things might be that we want to measure for. And then we place those individuals in an experience where they have to defend and articulate where they're at in time and place with this person and this AI persona, and they move through this navigating experience. Every candidate goes through the same experience. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I'm sure you're going to get to this. I guess you figured out the how, the what based on evidence and the how. Yeah. My question is, when I go on there, is it a text based? Is it an animated? Is it a video? Is it
voice based?
What does it look like from our point of view? Because I totally appreciate, and I'm not trying to get you to stop saying what it is.
Yeah.
But I immediately think, what's
the experience?
Scenario look
what's
like?
The interface look like?
Yeah. So there's two experiences pieces. The one I was describing, what we call a role play simulation, is currently text-based. So when you enter into the experience, first you get to practice. So you get a little 3-minute practice. You get familiar with it. Then the person introduces themselves and a series of text shows up and you have a text box and you respond and you move back and forth in the cadence of conversation, just like you would if you're in a real person. We provide a scenario up front so you know exactly what you're walking into. The experience is you're sitting in an office, you're sitting in a classroom, face-to-face talking with somebody.
Interesting.
We will be rolling out in the next series of weeks a voice version of this. So it will be a much more interactive voice-based conversation.
Wow.
Which doesn't disadvantage people from a typing perspective. Now, we are not moving forward in any aggressive way with video-based interaction because what we've heard and what others in the industry, mostly in the business world, have received as feedback is that people don't want to talk to an AI avatar. They want to have as realistic of a situation as they can have that replicates what they're going to experience. And so we find that the text-based and the voice-based would be the most authentic way to do that. We recognize this is not real. This is a simulation, just like an airplane pilot. When they go to a lot of people
would be used to a chat-based conversation because we do it
Sure.
every day, and a
They
lot
do
of
it every
of us are very heavily into. I mean, we're very educated readers, and
Right.
I totally understand that, and I'm much more at ease after hearing you say this because I had no idea.
Yeah.
But is it a choice between voice and text, or is it a mixture?
No, right now it is only text, and it will become voice. Now, for accommodation purposes, we will have flexibility for certain people because if they have a certain need to use a certain way to access equitably, then we would provide that ability to them. So the simulation experience that people go through, there's 2 different simulations that every candidate goes through. And then we take individuals through what's called a working style assessment. So you're probably familiar with personality assessments like Clifton Strengths and others.
Mm-hmm.
We don't subscribe to that solution. What we want to get at is, how do you show up at work? How do you do the work that you do? And how do you actually demonstrate that work as a member of a team so that we can actually help the organization look at the kind of leader or the kind of teacher they need versus how the candidate demonstrates himself. We do this through binary assessments, with both being successfully positive opportunities. So I can be A or I can be B, but both are positive. But one is distinctly different than another, and they fall into 4 categories. So I talked about catalyzing earlier. So one of the categories that we report on is, are you more of a catalyzing individual or a stabilizing individual? Both are great, but they're both not necessarily what you need at the moment when you're hiring. So in an experience where you've had trauma in a school, let's say we're hiring an elementary principal, and the principal that has left, the situation in the school was unhealthy, that there were a variety of difficult moments that had happened. Faculty felt a great sense of mistrust. The community was uneasy. There was threats of families to leave the school because they didn't feel they were connected and understood the community well. Would it be better to hire somebody who can stabilize a community or catalyze a community in that moment? Probably stabilize. It doesn't mean we don't want a catalyzer, but in the moment right now, we need to know. So if you hired me for that role, could I stabilize? I could. In my default mode every day, is that what I do? I don't. So I could have easily been hired because maybe I was very affable in an interview and interesting. I got a fancy resume and I get hired into the job and I've got talent, but I've got the wrong needs to use that talent. That's what we're trying to solve for.
Wow.
What this means, though, is that the school needs to know exactly what they're looking for, much more so than that standard job description.
Yes.
But that's why the school helps write the dialogues and the situations.
But the school needs to. So do you help that analysis of what do you need right now in the social studies department, grade 10 history class? Like what?
Yeah.
Does it get down to that?
What schools tell us is that, especially as they start seeing the data and the results from everybody, is that it changes so much about the look fors. And because historically what happens is a job opens up, we quickly dust off the job description. It looks very similar to the last one. We get it out as fast as possible because the market's hiring. And we celebrate when we get a lot of applicants. And we go, we've done a good job because we had 60 applicants. And then all of a sudden the resumes show up and we don't know what to do because we really don't have any discriminating information. So in this process where you've got all this evidence and you've actually seen them demonstrate their behaviors and you have analysis of it, the interview you have with those individuals is a much more deep investigation into, can I also see you now in an interview demonstrate the same behaviors you did in this simulation? Now I have a triangulation of information that I never had before. So instead of interviews being kind of discovery, they're really much more investigative. And that aids in the confidence of both the candidate and the school moving forward. Here's the other thing that I think is really we're really proud of is that all minimally qualified candidates get assessed. So if you have enough of the prerequisite schools to work in that environment, whatever the country, those conditions are, everybody gets a fair shot. Right now, if there's 50 applicants, you throw them up on a sticky board and you throw darts at a few of them. Now, maybe I'm taking a little liberty with that, but you can, you hope. You put your resume out there.
You can't interview 50 people.
You can't interview 50 people.
Yeah.
We can assess 50 people. In fact, we're working with an organization right now. We assessed 138. We said to them, do not pare it down to using the filters that you historically done. We'll assess them all. We don't charge by the assessment. We charge by the hiring position. And now we have troves and troves of data about how people perform and demonstrate their work. And an emerging product we want to provide to that 137 that didn't get hired is feedback. We want to give them information about how it is that they did, not necessarily their performance per se, but in these talent areas, how could you improve? Because we never get any information about that in these hiring processes.
Greg?
Hi, longtime listener. I'm fascinated by this, Rich. So my next question is, and I don't want to take the weight away from what you just said, that the feedback, we never get feedback because it's like you just hear nothing. Yeah. It goes into the ether. I totally appreciate that. I wish I'd asked you that actually. My question is, I have this inkling that, and you could verify this, once the first level of filter which is your TrueFit.com.
Yeah.
The TrueFit, once TrueFit pares down that 150, they're probably going to give a select few to the next level for the team or the recruiter to look at, in my opinion. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the school logs into their own platform, and it has all the analysis of the candidates that are applying, the status of their application. So there's a tracking system for them. And then when results are released, then they go into the results portal. And they can compare candidates to one another. They can look at all the varying individual. They get an individual report for every candidate, and then they pour through that data, and then they make the decision who from that pool they want to move forward into the interview process.
Got it. Because when I first heard about this, and just in a few sentences, I was thinking immediately, it's an AI making the decision, but it's not. And
no, it's humans.
And I just want to be clear about that for other listeners and for myself.
Yeah.
It's not about the AI. It's through a human lens, but the AI is assisting and making it more quality and being more equitable from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Right.
That was the mission at the beginning, was the AI was not going to be in the driver's seat of this. It was going to be part of our solution, but humans need to be at the wheel when we talk about who we're going to actually put in our schools. And so, but the data that we get from this interaction is incredibly rich and powerful. Here's what's really fascinating. We have applicants write us unrequested every single time we have a search out there, and write and say, that was the most humane experience I've ever been through in recruiting. Now, isn't that interesting? We're using AI, yet they're like, I was seen. I was able to demonstrate my abilities. I feel like I have a fair shot. That, from a school perspective, look at the marketing and branding of that to say, we assess everybody. We give everybody a shot. Underrepresented talent that's going to get bypassed because they haven't been at a school that is maybe as notable. They don't have a fancy degree as somebody else, or maybe they come from a different ethnic background or racial background that maybe schools have been hesitant to work for or to hire for, which is problematic on many, many levels. All of that information is not available when we do our reporting. We are completely mitigating those bias indices. Our system doesn't know your gender. It doesn't know your race, your ethnicity. It doesn't know where you've worked. It doesn't know any of that. It assesses you on your demonstrated ability, and then let everybody's real opportunities shine. And then if somebody wants to say that person performed really well, but they look different than us, or they come from a different part of the world than us, or they don't have the prerequisite school experiences that we always liked, they have to reintroduce bias on their side. And that really has changed. And many of the schools that work with us say that the reason they chose to work with us is because they wanted to challenge that concern that they had, that they didn't feel that they were getting enough representation of diversity into their applicant pool at the final stage, because those bias filters are there. We're human. It's part of our existence.
So to use an AI to level the playing field.
Oddly so, yes. And the question that people ask is, we're worried about AI and bias. Absolutely. By the way, just if you want to geek out a little bit, and I know we're wrapping here soon, we have 4 different AI models assess every candidate every time. So we have a whole confidence interval to look at to make sure that there's no wandering, there's no introduced scoring algorithm misfits. All of that's assessed, and then it's flagged. And if there is any anomalies, by a human.
I'm geeked out by that. I am totally, I'm impressed.
Really,
I'm in awe.
The team, I have to say that the team has done stuff that just blows my mind, frankly.
Can we talk for another 2 hours about this? I have 1,000 questions. Can we have you back on again, Rich? I'd love to have you on again because
I'd love to be on again.
Oh, so, please come back.
Rich, we really appreciate you taking the time. We know that there was constraints on our time today, and we don't want to go over time. Yeah. We do want to have you come back when that new reiteration with the voice, and you start to see the data, and you start to see maybe new candidates coming out of the woodworks because now it's not text-based.
Well, maybe we can try it live.
Oh,
that'd be fun.
Ooh, yes. We're all in. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a rich hour. Rich. Oh, it's been a
Oh
rich
my God,
hour.
pun intended.
I didn't even realize I was saying that. And we will hold you to it. Please come back and please
It'll be my honor.
Give us
Greg
your
and JP and Hannah, what a treat. I've loved every minute of the conversation.
Before you go, though,
it's flown this fast.
We can't let you go yet. Can you do a little pitch for it as far as how do I find out more as a listener about what you're talking about?
So you can do multiple things. You can follow us on LinkedIn, TrueFit Talent. We're present there, and we're sharing information and stories about the work we're doing with schools around the world. You can visit our website at truefittalent.com. There you can find a wealth of information about the services we provide and how we do the work we do. Importantly, Greg, for you in the Geek Out world, check out TrueProof, which is the way in which we actually measure AI authenticity in the candidate's application process to make sure that they're doing it ethically and fairly. Fascinating work. We also work on the talent development side, so it isn't just recruiting. We actually help teams and build analysis for teams to help them grow and evolve and be better and more effective. You can write to me, Rich at truefittalent.com, and I'll connect with you and set up a time to meet and talk. We love feedback. We love experiences that people are having with our solution. And also for listeners, if you want to try it out yourself, go to try.truefittalent.com and you can try a demo simulation yourself.
That was my question.
Right.
That was
We're
my question.
We're going to hold you to that. We're going to hold you to that.
So try it yourself. Try.truefittalent.com.
All those links will be included at the bottom, Rich, and I'm so excited about that. And yes, when you come back next time, we're going to get a little bit more into your teaching experience and your leadership experience, as well as back into this AI, because we didn't have enough time. No. They're both important.
Yeah, absolutely, they are critically. Well, thank you guys so much. What an honor.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
This is Greg, the single guy, and I'm going to bring us to a close here. We would like to say a warm thank you for Rich Boerner. You've been listening to. He is a very experienced head of school and international educator and educational leader, venturing off and trying to solve the idea of how to better recruit, how schools can better recruit talent that makes the right fit. I said it. And I would like to say thank you, Rich, for being on our show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. It's been an honor.
Got it. And thank you, JP Mint in Mexico and Hannah in Iowa currently. We will see you next time.